G'day all, I'm Graham Sanders and I live at Townsville, North Queensland. That's where latitude 19 crosses the east coast of Australia. I'm doing a series on the management of Tetragonula sapiens. Yes, you heard right, sapiens. It's the 21st of February 2017, about 9 AM, and I've received my sapiens hive. So in this episode, Introduction to Sapiens. Now, the sapiens species is found anywhere from the Philippines right down to the Townsville region, but not further south. And there's reasons for that which I'll discuss later. The sapiens bee, as you can see there, it's a little smaller than the Hocking's eye. It doesn't have that bulldog walk either that you notice with Hocking's eye. They have a very distinctive bulldog type walk. These are more of a crawling walk. But this hive's very active. You can see rubbish going out and you'll probably see pollen and honey bees going in, so it's all good. So this hive is a very strong hive. Now, but the main difference is in the internal structure of the nest. Now, nest size, roughly only from literature anywhere from 1 litre to 4 litres, I believe, in the Philippines. So 3 to 4 litres would be its maximum size that you go for. Smaller nest size than the Hocking's eye hive. But more importantly, they don't have an advancing front like Hocking's eyes or Carbonara. These bees lay in clumps. A clump of eggs here, and then they move completely to a new location for another clump of eggs, and so forth and so forth. So they don't have the one nest structure with the advancing front. They just have clumps here, clumps there, clumps there. Now that immediately tells you that's harder to keep warm in cold weather, because you haven't got all the eggs massed together, you haven't got the mass of bees around with their own metabolism warm in the hive. But there's more. Hocking's eye in colder climates put a sheath of invoculum, just a sheath we'll call it, of wax around the brood to keep it warm. And that's enabled Hocking's eye to colonise about as far south as the southeast corner of Queensland. Carbonara puts 3 or 4 wraps of this sheath around their brood. That enables them to go down as far as Sydney. Not a problem in the world. But sapiens don't make that sheath at all. So in other words, sapiens are left with the environment they're in. Oops, hang on a second, I'll just refocus that. That should refocus hopefully. Now, sapiens only occur as far south as about latitude 19 in Australia, because that's where the southerlies blow up in the wintertime. They peter out around latitude 19. A bit further south, generally about Bowen, so about latitude 20, they really peter out. Occasionally they make it up here, but because these bees don't have any method of keeping their hive warm, they only come far south as here. For that reason, you'll see what hive I'll be putting them into. What other characteristics about sapiens do we need to know? Well, they don't have a rigid brood structure, as I said. And they also don't have a rigid pollen where they store their pollen and honey. It's a bit more loose as well, but they do keep it roughly together. So the pollen store will still be near the entrance, but it'll tend to have more honey pots in it. And the honey store will tend to have a little bit of pollen in it. So that tells you that if I want to get honey out of this, I'm going to have to use my plastic hive with the honey trays. Why would I bother with such a bee? Well, A, there's the science of learning about it, but B, I am told that sapiens produce the mildest of all the native bee honeys in Australia. And so I want to actually try this honey and see what it's like. So that's a brief overview of Tetragonula sapiens, as you can see there. I think I've covered it all. Oh, one last thing. You will see in future videos where this is located. Sapiens like dark, shady areas. Being a little bee, they tend to want the dark, shady areas where no one can find them. So the hive positioning is critical with sapiens. You want a dark, shady area, and this hive is located under a lot of trees where it's dark and cool and everything else. They just like that dark, cool area. They don't want overheating and they don't want it too cold. So out of the cold southerly winds, so this is on the northern side of the house, under trees to keep it nice and cool from any heat wave conditions we get, and a good insulated hive so that we even out the temperatures. Very important if you're going to get sapiens living as this far south as of its range. In fact, they don't get further south than here. This is it. So enjoy the series on it, and we will go from there.